What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
We welcome our listener back tonight for yet another anatomically correct episode of Notes from an Artist. According to the authorities, my name is Tom Semioli. I am your co-host, along with my fellow quadruped, David C. Gross. David, say hello to our listeners.
Good God, quadruped, anatomically correct. What in God's name have I gotten myself into?
It's called Notes from an Artist, the show. See the logo on the top?
Oh, okay.
All right. Now, you, the audience member, may be listening to David and myself every Monday night on Cygnus Internet Radio. Let me spell that out for you. CYGNUS. Cue that up on the internet browser of your choice. www.cygnusradio.com. You, the audience member, may be listening to us on our Notes from an Artist podcast, streaming right now, David, at this very moment on Apple, Amazon, Buzzsprout, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are potted.
That's lovely.
Thank you. Now, David, if you aspire to win friends and influence your neighbors, check out our YouTube page, oddly enough, David, called Notes from an Artist, where you can enjoy behind-the-scenes video clips with our past guests. And if we can figure out a way to put video clips up of our future guests, we will do so.
That would be great.
And also be sure to log on to www.notesfromanartist.com to keep up with whatever we are doing at any given moment. Now, our show tonight, David, is a funky one. Our esteemed guest is Yolanda Charles. Now, we are both big fans of British bass players. Something about the way the Brits, with their stiff upper lips, interpret American rhythm and blues and soul music that we don't quite grasp here in the United States of America.
Well, Tom, I don't think it's their lips, it's their fingers, actually.
They stiff upper fingers. You know, my late wife, Leona, who was African-American and grew up in the classic era of Motown and revered 80s urban pop, she was a big fan of Later with Jules Holland, as of course we both are. And Jules hosted many British R&B artists, and Leona always commented on how the Brits were rendering soul music with more soul than us Yanks. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, to my ears, rhythm and blues pop, for lack of a better descriptive, is all programmed here in the colonies, whereas in the UK they actually use living, breathing rhythm section players, which is where Yolanda comes in.
I think you're right, but I think it even goes a little deeper than that. I think because of World War II, all the American soldiers that came over with the blues records, that started that first, quote-unquote, British invasion. Blues artists like Little Richard, you had Fats Domino, and all of the British invasion bands, they cite all these groups. And some of the lesser known British bands that did have some hits like Manfred Mann, they were big blues enthusiasts. So if we fast forward to the next generation, heavy metal, if you pray at the Zeppelin trough, you can see there's a definite blues influence, yet with John Paul Jones as a perfect example, there's a very James Jamerson Motown-y thing.
Absolutely.
Fast forward into the 80s, everyone from Duran Duran to a number of the New Romantics, they were playing a funkier version of new wave, so to speak. And it just established itself. I mean, you can go, what it was, the 89 was the brand new heavies?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So it makes perfect sense in so many ways. And someone else, think about Paul Weller, who Yolanda played with. You know, there's a funky aspect to what he did, the Style Council, and the stuff that he did on his own.
Exactly. You're mentioning 80s bass players, of course. Mark King of Level 42, very soulful player. Pino Palladino with Paul Young, even though it was fretless, he was funky. Of course, the great Norman Watt-Roy with Ian Dury. John Taylor, you mentioned, with Duran Duran. Another favorite of mine was Paul Damon with Sade. And, of course, our friend of the show, Guy Pratt, with Pink Floyd and Brian Ferry. And Yolanda follows in their bass steps. She plays to the song, but she makes sure the listener is aware of the bass. I really dig her approach to the instrument. Gosh, her resume spans pop, funk, dance, R&B, orchestral, rock. Her list of collaborators, Robbie Williams, Hans Zimmer, Jimmy Somerville, Paul Weller, as you mentioned. She was also a member of Squeeze. She backed Sir Michael Jagger, Dave Stewart, Marcella Detroit, Roger Daltrey, Sinead O'Connor. Incredible career. And she leads her own band, which we discussed in the interview, PH, as in the chemistry term. She's also co-led such UK techno-funk collectives as the Deep Mo and Mama Yo, which will play in our set list. And David, we did talk about her role as an educator and an entrepreneur. I think she's the only guest we've had on that has won the MBE. She was awarded the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. So there you go, royalty tonight on Notes from an Artist.
Well, I didn't think you know it, but I actually had the Most Valuable Yiddish Award.
The MYE?
That's it. It was kind of schmaltzy, but what can you do? The other thing about this interview, and really from young bass players, older bass players, to bitter bass players like you, Tom, this is a wonderful treatise on how to establish your career. I was very taken. Some people will listen to this interview and go, wow, that's very calculating. No, it's not calculating. It's intentional. She has this great philosophy on A, what do you think success is? B, what do you think success for yourself will be? C, how do you go about it? And I find it fascinating. And I think this is something that we're going to post, hopefully, with another cover story in Bass Musician Magazine.
Right. And something interesting you mentioned, Yolanda's work in education certainly echoes your Empower Through Music education programs in New York City, and that music opens the doors to greater appreciation of the arts, the sciences, mathematics, language, self-esteem, and critical thinking, all of which are in short supply these days. Not on this show.
Well, yeah, and obviously it kept you and I out of prison. So, there's the good, or in some cases the bad. Yeah, I think I mentioned it. I 7 years old, I was playing clarinet in the school band when New York City schools actually had music programs. It was funny because Yolanda mentions, gosh, we take for granted that music is a part of our regular curriculum. And over here, it's just not that way.
Yes, it's very unfortunate. And it's also fascinating to learn that Yolanda never planned to be more than a bedroom bassist. But when opportunity knocked, she answered. She never stops learning, which is what this show is all about. So, David, let's go to Yolanda School, and we shall discuss the Yolanda playlist after the interview. Welcome to the show, Yolanda. Yolanda, where in London do you live?
I'm in North London, slightly east, close to an area called Tottenham.
Yes, the Tottenham Spurs, right? Or what is the team?
Yeah, that's walking distance, if I fancy it.
David, let me introduce our audience member to Yolanda Charles. She is a bassist. She is a composer. She is a band leader. She is an educator. She is an entrepreneur. She is a public speaker, which I would imagine she's a little private speaker. She is a musical collaborator. She is a poetess, and you can read some of her work on her website, g4dz.com. Yolanda, what does that Earl stand for? What's the significance of G4DZ?
It was a way of us shortening, at the time we called our company Groove for Days, and we spelt it with a Z. And then we just shortened it to Groove, so G4 and then DZ.
So there's really more of a technical. Yolanda is a novice gardener, and to show support for her environmental egress, I have my house plant here. This is cardboard. You see that? Okay, I'm holding that up. I'll leave that there. We don't have much money for props here. In 2020, Yolanda, you were awarded the MBE, the Member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, for your services as a musician in the UK music business. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did that come about? Tell us about that.
I don't understand it personally. I mean, I love it. It's great. I received it. I accepted it because you're asked if you want to accept. And some people do turn it down. There's some political connotations and, some people are very sure that they don't want to be associated with that kind of thing. So I accepted. But at the time, I was confused about why I was being given an award, because I feel that those kind of awards are usually given good public deeds, charity, and I'm not known for any of these things. I have had quiet little activities that no one would know about, just to help local communities and stuff. But nobody from those backgrounds would have nominated me, and you have to be nominated. Somebody thought she should get an MBE and nominated me, and it was accepted. I guess they do a little search on you, see what your presence is like online, see if there's anything incriminating, any associations that shouldn't happen near the crown. And I came up clean, man. So I guess that meant I was like safe enough to award this thing to. But it's cool. It's people react really nicely about it mostly. So
David, let me expand on Yolanda's musical pedigree. Her career as a bassist. Studio on stage, you worked with Paul Weller, Jimmy Somerville Squeeze, led by the great Difford and Tilbrook, Robbie Williams, Dave Stewart. You served as his MD, Laura Mulva, Michael Philip Jagger, otherwise known as Mick Jagger to you, David, and Roger Daltrey, Sinead O'Connor, Hans Zimmer. David, guess what? Bass Musician magazine, for which David and I both write for, proclaimed Yolanda as the high priestess of funk.
Oh, that's right, they did. How funny. Yeah, they did. You always give
that's
a
good.
female musician, you always get given some kind of queen something or princess something, or high priestess was good though. I got that one. So it's cool.
Yeah.
That's good, David. You know, I mean, Bass Musician magazine owes us some sort of deification. I mean, we should be, I don't know, the lapsed Catholic of funk, or I don't know, what we should get some.
Yeah, I would be the lapsed Catholic. That's pretty well true.
You'll be the rabbi of funk. The Moyle of funk. Anyway.
Oh, yes. Thanks for the tip.
Now, you are also a band leader, Project PH. Let's talk about that, Project PH and instrumentals. And is the PH name based on the, I guess, the chemistry term, right, for acidity? Is that it?
Yeah, it's representative of balance, basically.
Okay. And
I mean, yes, there's lots of different ways you could look at that. I was looking to spell funk, but without having FUNK, because somebody had taken the name when I didn't use it for a short while. I thought I'd spell it Project Funk with a PH, and then I thought, but nah, I don't think I'll do that. So I just decided to just have it as I wonder what that PH stands for. And it does create some curiosity, so it worked. Yeah, it also represents balance as well because of the acid alkaline. And it gave me a lot of material to give to find titles for my songs. So we have a track called Acid Test and, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a bit of fun, really, with names.
Back in 1961, I think it was George Russell wrote a tune called Status Funk, and he spelt it status and then PHUNK.
Yeah.
So he was before funky got funky in 61.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Cool. Now, Yolanda, you're a band leader here. Now, you've worked with quite a few band leaders. I know this could say that this funk, prog, jazz fusion is most closest to your heart, but how are you as a band leader? What type of approach do you take with PH?
If you mean creatively, I write a lot of the material beforehand. I bring it in and I tell the guys this is basically roughly how I want to go, and I welcome them to contribute. So that's a normal kind of way of writing. I don't usually bring a whole finished piece of music because I do think, if you're going to work with band, you need to have their voice in the sound. Otherwise, you can just get anyone. So, and I really want their voices, so I get them to contribute. Sometimes we fight over chord changes, a little bit of a tussle. We don't fight over the bass lines, but but I'll say, okay, you can have that. Sometimes they want to be more jazz and I want them to be more something else. So we do a little bit of that together. But I've written a ballad recently that I really liked. I wrote on the bass, and sometimes what I do when I write on the bass is I just write the bass line and I write the top line, and it gives space for a bit of colour.
Well, as you know, the chord change isn't the chord change until the bass player tests.
Right, exactly, until the bass player lays it down. So yeah, it's a bit of fun for me to hear where their ears take them. It's not always where mine are. I like that contribution because, then you get a fresh angle on something you think you know really well. And that's the harmony side of things and the composition. The other side is I'm quite tough in terms of rehearsals and things like that. I think my reputation is a little bit that I'm a bit of a whip cracker.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, I mean, I think I'm not, because I've worked in the pop world and everything's much more restrictive in that world. So you've got MDs that are listening out for every little bass fill sometimes, and they really don't want to hear any other fills apart from the ones that's on the record. And if you play one, then you'll get a stern look. And if the keyboard player, slightly reharmonizes the chord, changes some of the cluster, puts the sixth in, or worse still, something extended, a 9 or 13, it's fired, the sort of thing. Because that's jazz, So I've been around that kind of level of discipline. So I'm more lenient than that, Obviously they're freer because it's a jazz flavored sort of style of writing. But then I'll say, okay, this doesn't feel right. We've got to work on this section. This is not breathing. I'll just kind of make them work on sections until I'm happy be, sometimes I want something to be really tight, and other times I want the ebb and flow to be in the music, breathe and let go a bit. So I use my body, I kind of conduct almost with my bass, so they can see it going up and down. They can see when I want the downbeat to land. Sometimes it's with a little pause, like a la classical style, so that it's not, you got in jazz and fusion and all that, you've got this precision element and this excellence in technical delivery that's all about the meter and being right. And then other times you want this kind of element to it that makes it feel human, and sometimes that has to be instructed in musicians that play very tightly. So you're kind of trying to get them to let go as well. So you need both things. So I do both with them. It's like today, is she going to cut asks for being too loose or too tight today? Which is it?
We had Benny Reitfeld on the show, and Benny was with Miles, and Benny said the same thing, that Miles would give musical and visual cues, and just the way he moved his horn and things like that. That's a very effective tool.
I think the fact that you've MD'd other bands and the fact that you are an entrepreneur, and Tom, entrepreneur is the French pronunciation.
Yes, I didn't know the French had a word for entrepreneur, David. Thank you.
That's true. To be a band leader, and it's a funny way, the bass player should be the band leader and the bass player should be the musical director, because if you really think about it, they're connecting the percussion or the drums, and they're also dealing with the harmony. And if they're a good bass player, then they can handle both at once. Go figure. It's kind of easy to see you in that position.
Well, what did Ron Carter teach us about that, David? He said, Miles was the band leader, but I led the band. There you go.
The role of bass in the band is that connection between the harmony and the rhythm, for sure. But also, there's something about bass players' characters as well. I don't know whether you can say that it's a type of character that gets attracted to an instrument. There's a little bit of that going on, I think. Some of it's funny, like as in a way of ribbing someone or taking the piss, as we'd say. But in a real sense, I do think there's, your character attracts you towards the qualities of the instrument. Or maybe your character takes on the qualities of the instrument over time. Might be the other way around. Maybe all those Guitar Hero kind of ego monsters, if they exist, get turned into that by the nature of the instrument. Who knows which comes first, right? Anyway.
That is a fascinating subject. I've addressed that with other bass players. And what I find, and David and I are bass players, that bass players, my friends who are bass players, are very, very supportive of each other. And David and I, believe it or not, are very supportive of each other. And every Wednesday night, we hold court at Arturo's Italian restaurant on Houston Street in Manhattan. You're welcome to join us. You'll love the tiramisu.
It's a long commute, though.
It's a long commute from London, I'm unfortunately.
I'd stay over.
But we do have all the bass players to get together, and it's amazing how much we share with each other information. We're giving each other equipment, and there's a real supportive energy there that, yes, you are correct, you don't find with drummers and guitar players or even keyboard players, who tend to be very competitive.
Name 10 bass players that have gone to prison. You can't. But you certainly can talk guitar players and drummers. I'm thinking Keith Richards and Keith Moon as a starting point that you begin. And from there, we can add on.
Just the key.
Bass players never go to prison. We just don't get caught.
We just don't get caught, but it's true.
I don't want to die, oh, please. I don't want to die, oh, please. Oh, don't make me burn now.
Well, it's interesting. This is your life, Yolanda Charles. Now, you started experimenting with different instruments in school. You had a very good music program where you went to school. And I know your mom didn't want you to bring home the trumpet to make noise, but you originally started on guitar. But at 15, you became enamored with the bass. Yes? And you were in, what was it, sixth form college in the UK that taught you the mechanics of the bass, the music theory and things like that?
Yeah, I was able to learn a bit of bass in my guitar class, actually, because I had guitar and I didn't like it. I didn't like what I was being told to learn. So I used to come into the lessons with bass lines that I'd picked out and was playing them on the guitar. The guitar teacher was not impressed with that at all. So he kind of tried to dissuade me from that. Because he explained that if I was going to play bass, I should probably learn to sing as well. Maybe he was a Paul McCartney fan or something. Because he was teaching me Beatles songs as well. And I didn't listen to the Beatles at home. We were into Caribbean music and jazz and stuff like that. So I didn't really hear any Beatles, only what was on the radio. I knew the music. Everybody knows the Beatles, but I never owned a record by the band. Nobody in my house did. So being asked to learn Beatles records and things like that, I didn't connect. I kind of wanted to quit. And then he left and the new guitar teacher came in. And he was a classically trained guitarist who couldn't play classical anymore because he'd shut his fingers in his car door and sliced off a couple of them. And when they healed back, he'd lost his touch. So this is his words. So I became a jazz guitarist instead. Cheeky bugger.
Shades of Django Reinhardt.
Maybe so, right? He's lucky he didn't lose a finger, right? So he was more sympathetic to where my heart lay. He said, well, if you want to play bass, then let's get a bass and bring it in the session. So in my guitar lessons, my guitar teacher had me jamming on bass, and he wrote out some walking lines for me. I didn't understand how to construct walking lines. I didn't understand anything about chords and things, but he had me reading walking lines, so I got a sense of that, because that's what he knew bass to be, because he was really into jazz. It wasn't like pop jazz or fusion or anything like that. Then when I left, I went to this tertiary education system. So we got, primary, secondary, tertiary. Tertiary is kind of just before going to college. So it'd be
it's like a prep school, yes? Is that what it would be in America?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
The term, you guys. It's just before you take it's what we call A-levels. You take our A-levels at that point. So at that point, that's where I went into a kind of music college. And that's when my session career actually kind of began from there, because I was introduced to somebody that remembered me a year later when I left at 18. And when I was 19, called me back, found my number, called back, and I got my first pop session.
I know you had an aversion to playing live. You loved the bass, but you would have been happy as a bedroom bassist. But was that the experience with, I guess, the Jonathan Ross show, one of his shows that you got to be a house bass player?
Yeah, no, that was later. I was at 19. I got booked to be with an artist called Jimmy Somerville. So that was my first session, and I was playing live on TV that age, because the opportunities were there back then, which is cool. And I did a pop video for the single.
What year was that?
Would be 1990, I think.
Question for you. You played live with him then?
Yeah.
Did you ever do Peter's Pop Show in Dusseldorf?
No, we didn't travel. You know what happened? I was working in a supermarket, right? And then I was working for Jimmy Somerville as well. But I had my supermarket job. It was like a safe or something, right? And Ellen was called Sainsbury's. I was so happy because I had this job, but I couldn't quit my actual job that paid the bills. So kept it going. And then Jimmy Somerville's team finally told us that we had a tour booked, or was going to be booked for a tour. And I quit my job in the supermarket. And then I was about to travel, and the tour got cancelled.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I didn't quite make it to Europe with Jimmy Somerville, and I lost my job in the supermarket, which I wasn't terribly sad about. So yeah, and then I started working as a session musician. So it was a shame that I didn't get over to Europe with him.
But your formal training definitely must have helped you in session work, because you knew how to read, you knew how to play parts and things. Did you find yourself in a situation where the parts were scripted out to you? They said, Yolanda, come up with something for this.
No, at that age, I can't really think of any times I was given any charts that were even chord charts. I mean, very rarely were we given any charts. I mean, we were expected to pick things up and prepare at home. And you weren't sent charts. You had to have good ears. We couldn't separate the track. Couldn't just get a nice little bit of software that would separate all the multi-tracks for you, so you could hear everything. So you'd have to really study something and learn it, because the charts were useless anyway, because often what you would find is the detail in why something sounds good is not on the page. It's the way it was played. And so that needs to be studied, especially on bass. I mean, the difference between playing, I don't know, a G on fret 5 of the D string, or playing 10 on the A string. I mean, that's going to be a different tone, right? So you're listening for those things in the music to hear, why is that working? What is it conveying? If you want to convey something with more power, then you're going to play up the neck on the thicker places of the string, on the thicker strings up higher up the neck. You can only work that out through this. It's not on the page. I mean, maybe people write tab out now to tell you exactly what note, but I mean, I was never given a chart. So it really trains your ear, and also trained my ear in terms of understanding what makes a bass line good. I might listen to something and pick the notes out and get them right, and then figure out where the geography, so where is it on the neck? But then the next thing is how loud, how long the notes, what's the dynamics, and what's the placement. And the dynamics, the note length, and the placement before, on, after the beat, that creates the feel. Those three things create the feel. And to get that combination of note length, dynamic, and placement, rhythmic placement right, takes a lot of listening. And now, because I did that, I've been doing that 30 years really, I'm still learning, but because I did that early in my career, because I was always asked to play other bass players' bass lines, I've developed a really strong sense of time when it comes to what I want to do with my bass line. So I can put it wherever I want, really. If I want it to be here, there, I can play the different notes in the riff and choose to play note 1 behind, note 2 on, note 3 after. You can play dynamically loud on beat 1, quiet beat 2, and long on beat 3, and you've got a different bass line. It's quite incredible, these small touches, what it does to the bass riff.
And that's obviously why you teach.
It's obviously why I teach. Yeah, I love teaching, actually, because that, to me, that's where the gold is. I love teaching beginners because I've got a blank slate, start them off on the right foot. But I like working with more advanced players because a lot of the time I haven't explored this. And I've developed a bunch of exercises to develop this for them, so they don't have to.
Sure.
And what's really interesting is watching their faces. It's so great to watch it dawn on them. Advanced players who've never really kind of gone in and listened hard like that. I love the exploration of this area.
And it's also great for you because someone asked the question, how do I do that?
Yeah.
So you actually learn yourself. It's a wonderful thing. I have a company brings music programs into the New York schools, and beginners, the little ones, are great because when they do their performances, there's just this unbridled joy. Yeah. So it's very cool.
How did you get into teaching? I know you teach at Royal Northern College. Yes, you've taught at the Institute of Contemporary Music Performance and East London Arts and Music. How did you enter that world?
You know what? It's quite a funny thing for me because, as you mentioned, I could have been happy being a bedroom musician because I just love bass. So it was just fine. I was fine. And I've been playing since I was 7, something or another, clarinet and the rest of it. I didn't really want to be a performer as such. So finding myself in that place was difficult. The next point on from there is speaking to people on stage, an audience. I never had to do that because I was the bass player. I could hide a little bit behind the backing singers or the horns and stand next to the drummer and kind of be unnoticed if I wanted to. And I kind of like that. Then I think it's because I represent to people something different, something interesting, because I've been doing this professionally since 1990. In terms of session musicians, there's not a lot of women around. There are now, but there weren't then. And I think for people, they're curious about what life is like for me, and they want me to talk to others, especially in the education system, college-age students that might gain something. So most colleges are populated in the tutor kind of, what's that called? The alumni, is it? By musicians who are working. Mm-hmm. So you just meet working musicians who also happen to teach. And I think one of my invitations came that way, which was, would you come into a college and give a talk and a demonstration or something? And I said, okay, I'm all right, maybe. And I thought about it for a bit. And I also had just not long released an album with my own music. So I thought this is an opportunity for me to have a little performance. So I didn't really do the talk as such. I did a performance with talking in it. It was the first one, and it was 2005, pregnant with my 3rd kid, and I'd just finished doing all this touring. I just finished doing B.B. King's album and Mick Jagger and Dave Stewart album and the Robbie Williams tour that I'd done. It was quite a big, busy period. So by 2005, I decided I wanted to have another kid before it was too late. So I was about 35 then or something. This invitation came up, and I thought, I'll take that, and was terrified. Absolutely terrified. It was how I used to feel when I was performing first time when I was young. I had to talk to people. It was really difficult. And it was a 2-hour event, so I was such a swot. So what I did, right, is I wrote myself a script. I wrote my pauses. I timed everything. I didn't understand. They thought I was reading music, but I wasn't reading the script. And I was following this so closely because I was terrified. I didn't know how to speak to a crowd or any of that stuff. And I remember at the time when I finished the 2 hours, I was looking at the clock. I was thinking, this must be over soon, And I saw that it got to that 2-hour point, and nobody knew why, but I just put my hands up and went, yeah, like an idiot. Because I was so proud of myself that I actually got through it. So that was and from there, once you start doing these things, people start inviting you to do more and more. And then I've just done them for years since 2005.
Wow. Well, we've spoken to some of your colleagues, and it seems like music is a real important part of the British education system here. Where in America, we have to fight to get music into the school.
Right. Okay. Well, we complain here, but when you hear about other people's stories, you realize maybe we've got it better than we realize.
Oh, most definitely, Yolanda. The budgets in the New York schools music is an afterthought, maybe. And it's terrible because I remember when I was going to school, I had a clarinet. Then I saw the Beatles and realized I'm never going to meet a girl with a clarinet. So it had to change. But seriously, it's remarkable remarkable how unimportant music is in the classroom. And I find it even more absurd because most of the principals and most of the people in the powers that be had music. And for them not to think that that was an integral part of their growing up is really sad.
So how do young people get access to music and to instruments and things like that then? Is it a wealth thing?
You can get a little bit in school. It's not just a barren wasteland. But sometimes a school, if they have X amount of dollars, they'd rather have a chorus program than spend the money on instruments. Because if they spend the money on instruments, they're going to have to wait till the following year to have a program. That's one way. I think parents are still the guiding light. Parent will buy you an instrument, but for the most part, the school is extraordinarily secondary and third, tragically.
Yeah, we don't really have music. Well, Yolanda, what do you learn from your students?
What do I learn from my students?
Yes. What lessons do they teach you?
They teach me how to figure out how to help them, usually. Quite interesting. Their character is the kind of instructor for me, tells me how to help. My experience with them teaches me how empowering it is for them when they achieve goals and how excited they get. I really see the importance of learning an instrument, the impact that it has. And it's not because they all want to be performers, it's just the joy of actually achieving something. And as well, just a simple thing, like when I'm giving a private lesson at home, I will once, if I've got a beginner bass player, I'll get them playing a riff, once they're settled in, I'll jam with them on guitar. And the pleasure they get from just jamming with somebody, when most of the beginner musicians have never had that chance before. And for me, it's just a simple thing, guitar and play. And in some cultures, Irish culture, some cultures, maybe some African countries' cultures, it's just a normal thing to play an instrument. And you're just in the room, they're just around and you just pick them up and play them. But for a lot of British people, that's not the case. And so when I see the joy that they get from it, I really learn that from them, people. And it sort of incentivizes me to continue in the education field as well as the things that I want to do for myself. Yeah. Because I love watching that response in them. It's awesome.
Let's go back to your entrepreneurship. You have NLYC Productions.
That name's been discussed. It's Nick Linnick, so the two of us. He's the guitarist in my band, this young punk genius guitarist, annoyingly, who also is producing the band's album. I had no clue that was what was going to happen. Do you want to hear the story about what happened around that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I was playing at Ronnie Scott's because at Ronnie Scott's we do the late show every month.
I love Ronnie Scott.
And they have this late night program that starts where we start playing at about midnight, around midnight. There you go. Do 2 hours with a little gap in between the hour. I think Nick was invited to come down as a guest, so I hadn't met him before, and I put him on the guest list, not knowing who he was. And that night, in fact, those 2 days, John McLaughlin was playing at the Barbican, and I know Etienne Mbappe quite well. He's a very good friend of mine. So Etienne came down to Ronnie's with, I think it was Ranjit Barrett. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Oops, if I've got that wrong, please forgive me. Lovely. The drummer in John McLaughlin's band. They came down and watched us, and Nick was there too. So I met Nick, and then I introduced him, and the first time I met him, to Etienne Mbappe, which is quite a big deal, in the fusion world, which is quite a big thing. And then the next day I went to see John McLaughlin with Etienne at the Barbican before my Ronnie's date, which I had 2 in a row. And Nick was there watching the gig too. And then about 2 weeks after that, my guitarist had to quit the band because he was going back to Australia to be with his family. And I needed a guitarist. And I just met this guy at the Ronnie's and at the Barbican, and we all got on really well. And the other guys in the band know him. So he got the gig from just turning up at Ronnie's, meeting me, saying hi, hanging out. And then that's it. Then it turned out that he's actually a very skilled composer, producer, so producing the record. And he's done an amazing job on the record. And I really hope that people will appreciate the work that he does.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But I didn't say that because he'll hate me for saying that. But he is.
There's such an entrepreneurial aspect to being a musician nowadays. Now you talk about a record label and production company. Streaming has made hard copy music formats obsolete. Production, you can record on your iPhone now. There's a very interesting interview on Bloomberg TV, which you get in the UK, with Sylvester Stallone. I'm sure you remember him, right? Rocky? Yo, Adrian, yo. And he was saying that to... Thank you. I'm Italian American, so saying that Rocky could never have been made in today's world of analytics and demographic research, but that in order to be a successful actor, you have to have a hyphen next to your name. You have to be an actor, producer, director, screenwriter. It seems like that's the thread with your career. You're bassist, educator, production company, band leader. That to be a musician today, I would imagine you would advise your students, you've got to do more than one thing.
Yeah, and they kind of know. Everybody knows. I mean, it's funny actually, because I made my first record in 2002 and I did it cottage industry style then, before the web was what it is obviously now. And I did start a website and have my own record label, but I did it with far less of the tools, fewer of the tools that they have now. And I understood at that point that you need to have those skills. You can't just make a record. If you just make a record, then you'll be like all the other musicians I know that think they've made a record and it never leaves the hard drive basically, or they press it and it's in boxes for years in the back of the room. And so I was determined not to have that happen to me. So I thought, well, how can I get this out there? We just did everything ourselves between our friends. We produced it ourselves. We used friends' studios. We kept the cost down. I did pay the musicians because I was touring with other artists, so I could afford to pay them. But apart from that, I kept the costs down, pressed 1,000 copies or whatever, and used that to like a business card, like the way people use the web now. Media is a business card. It's also entertainment for others and it's the way for people to make money. But for musicians and other creatives, it's actually our business card now. It's the way that we tell people who we are, what we can do, let them know that we're available and the rest of it. It's not really, some people perceive it as showing off or being, some sort of narcissist or whatever. It's actually just, there's lots of reasons why people are on the web and have social media profiles and the rest of it. But amongst musicians that I know, most of us are there to just tell people that we exist and that we are available and this is what we can do. And so I used my album for that, which is like a bit bizarre for some people. It's like, what do you mean you made a record just so you could? Well, the reason why was because I'd been doing 20 years before that. So this was 2000. So no, not quite 20 years. It would have been about sort of 10 or so years. Yeah. I'd been working for Paul Weller, Roddy Frame from Aztec Camera. I did some work for Marcel Troy, various artists, but they were all in the kind of pop rock territory, which was great. I learned a lot working with those people, massive amounts, because if I'd just stayed in funk and soul, I would have had a narrower experience. Through going into the rock and the more pop stuff, it broadened my horizons. So I made this record and I was in a session with Dave Stewart actually and Mick Jagger. And it was the first time I met Dave Stewart because I was recommended by the drummer. And so he said, so who is Yolanda then? I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, is there anything more to you? I was like, yeah. And I made a record. He went, I'll bring it in then. And I said, oh, right then. So I would never, how people are so like hustly, they would have like all their records, like 5 copies and ready to just hand them out. I wasn't that person, right? So I was super shy. He told me to bring it in. So I did. And I brought it in and we were there in the studio for about a week. So I gave it to him that next day. And then a few days later, he told me that he'd listened through to the whole thing, gave me a bunch of pointers about where he thought this was great. He didn't criticize it. He just talked as a musician. And then he said, I think the first thing he said when I actually handed it to him was, oh, so you're not just a bass player then. And I didn't understand what that meant really at the time. But what that meant for him was that I was an all-round musician as opposed to an instrumentalist purely. And that he knew that I could arrange, he knew that I could organize, I could lead, I could write and I could record. And so because of that, that was a calling card, a business card move from my point of view. I didn't even know that at the time because he then gave me the job MDing his band in the UK. But it was from that album because I had this proof here that I could do all of those things. It qualified me, as well as the fact that we got on well in the studio. So making records and putting them out and making them available, making yourself available is important if you do want to create the right impression with people, because you can't expect people to understand who you are unless you tell them. But how you tell them isn't by bragging, it's about doing. So the best way to show that thing is to actually hand something over that represents you truthfully. And that's what I did. And it's been great because I actually went on from there directly to Hans Zimmer's band. And then that led to, working with Hans Zimmer for the following 5 or 6 years. Up until 20.
That's a great business model. You should be teaching at the London School of Business.
Funny you say that. No. It's interesting, right? It's just, to me, it's like kind of chance and luck, but also the opportunities for the luck to arise only occur if you create the conditions. And the conditions are you doing your bit, which is, like I said, making the record, not just having it on the hard drive, following through with things, and also being prepared to get your music kind of torn apart by a world famous producer by putting it out there, but then actually what comes back is something that you didn't foresee, something way better.
I've got a little bit of time on you, and instead of the recording, handing out the records, you would just say, oh, I'm going to be playing here, I'm going to be playing there, and they would get a sense of what you did from that. And of course, It's a very, very similar thing, but that's a great idea. Now you could just give them a thumb drive, say, here.
I think this is the function that social media plays now, because you can just literally just send a link and then they can just see everything on your page. So the page, when people are putting up posts saying, hey, this is what I had for breakfast, or check out these shoes, mate, don't bother with that stuff, because you don't know who's looking on your social media. And what they're looking for sometimes is not what size shoe you're wearing and where you bought it from. They're looking for, what did you write? What do you sound like? What's your lyrics? What's your thoughts? What's your creative sort of space used for? And I think sometimes maybe musicians can get confused about what they think the social media is for. Either for you to connect with your friends, that's fine, but it's also, we're entertainers, we're creators, we're musicians, and we're artists, some of us. So really, when I'm online, I'm working. I'm not, even if I'm talking to somebody, I'm talking mindfully that I'm representing something to people. I'm not just myself, because it's not fair to expect you to be yourself and to also qualify for work with anybody and everybody. You've got to be your professional self when you're in the professional space. When you can let go, that's fine. But to understand, this is when I'm being me and this is when I'm working. So I'm representing my band. So I'm going to talk about band stuff. I'm not going to talk about my kids. I'm not going to talk about where I shop. But some people do that, and that's their kind of social media presence. But I do think it's useful. Separate the two things. Be aware that it's every time somebody looks at your page, they're making judgments, they're assessing, and you don't know what they're looking for. And if you're there for work, focus on work. If you're there for fun, that's cool. But maybe those two things don't mix like oil and water. We don't know.
I think you're absolutely right. I do.
Strategy needs to be applied a little bit, especially for the musicians that I know that are complaining about not getting work, and they think that they can just put up a video of themselves playing like something cool or whatever. It's like, no. You have to be intentional. What are you trying to communicate to people? I know what I'm doing when I do it. I'm not always getting it right. This is why I'm speaking this way, because I've made a lot of mistakes in this area myself. I do think that there's some thought has to be put into what you communicate to others. And it's not that you're being fake or manipulative. It's just that, is it your space of work, or is it your space of play, or is it your space of sharing? But in reality, I don't think we are completely with abandon revealing all to everybody we meet in this world. There's your space for your intimacy, your close friends, the trust space, and then there's the workspace, acquaintance space, and then there's the public space. It can't all be the same thing. I don't think we should all be everything the whole time. So I'm working on that right now, because I'm writing an autobiography, nearly finished it, and it's like, wow, this is a lot of me. Do I really want to put that out there? So I'm really thinking this through right now.
Well, no, it sounds like a good plan. How should I put this? You were talking about musicians complaining. I think that's early on. I learned something very necessary. There are always going to be people who complain. Oh, yes. And then there are going to be people who do not complain. And that's just the way it is. What's that old joke? How do you make a musician complain? Give him a gig.
Right?
Yeah.
I've got people asking for advice sometimes. Maybe it's coming in the form of, can you help me? Or have you got advice you can give? And that's one of the areas that I would like people who do want advice from me specifically, to think about that a bit more, about what do you actually want? That's the first thing I speak to when I do some mentoring and stuff for at any age, just musicians in general, not just bass players. And the first thing I ask them is, what do they want? And very few can answer that straight away. Very interesting, because the first thing I say is, what do you actually want to achieve? Not by any date or anything. What are you actually looking for? What do you really want? What does it look like? Is it you with like a top paying gig touring well? Is it you with an album out? Is it you with a certain amount of recognition or sales or follower numbers, or making the best record you could have made? And then look at where the compromise has to happen. Maybe the best record you could make doesn't equate a huge following list. So which do you really want? Do you want the list, or do you want the great record? So then honing it down, right down to what's the actual core, because you can't have it all. If you want the great record, what does that entail? Oh, you really like atonal music, do you? Okay, well, I just got something to tell you about that. Big follower numbers doesn't come with atonal music. So you really want to make a record that's a bit out there. Okay, so how much do you really want to make? And if they really want to make that record, it's a case of getting settled in yourself and acknowledging that you have to let go of some other ideas you have about what success looks like, because the true success is actually the record. So it might mean that you don't sell a lot, might mean you don't have a big follower list, but you've identified that your actual real ambition is the being this particular thing. Once that's acknowledged and so it's said out loud, strangely what happens is this peace kind of happens. It's like, oh, I get it. I get what I want now. So now it's easy to not be a little bit envious about the kid that can play 5 chords that has got 10 million followers. You know, it's like, yeah, we don't need to bother ourselves with that because I'm making this thing. It's like fully focused my attention. So what's going on out there now, it doesn't matter anymore. It's sort of like, it's a path to happiness, really knowing what you really want, really. I mean, that's what I try to do with people when I talk to them is...
and success is so different for everybody. It really is.
It is. That's right. And they often don't know what it is until they've really started to explore that. And I only just figured out some of this stuff myself.
But you know something, Yolanda, being a musician is the easiest way to really figure that out, because as a beginner, okay, I've got to learn scales. That's your goal. Okay, so now I've learned scales. Now I want to play with someone. Okay, now I want to play with someone good, and on and on. So you're almost getting those life skills without even knowing it.
Agreed. Yeah, I do think everybody could do with learning an instrument just for the sake of playing. It's such a great thing. I've been in situations where, not amongst my upbringing, but I've just been in situations where people have been in a gathering, and by the end of the night, everybody's singing. They all know the same songs, and somebody's playing piano or guitar. It might be pop songs, but they all know the lyrics. And I would wonder, how did that come about? And it's that community element. It can translate in some instances where everybody's playing an instrument because they're around. And I've seen that. I had one experience at a family member's house where even my cousin, who I would not have assumed she would be involved with this, she had shakers and she was singing. Everybody was up in the room. It was like a gig, but we were the audience and the musicians as well, you know. And that, to me, that's joyous. And not a single one of those people professional. I never played in front of anyone. I never will. That night was one of the best nights I've had in that kind of, you know, gathering kind of situation. Because, you know, we're all making music together, man. You know, it's like when you're on stage or you're just in a rehearsal studio in your front room jamming with your friends. Why should that be limited just to musicians? It's not only our space to experience that kind of joy. So if everybody could play something, then we'd all get a chance, wouldn't we?
And then if you look at it, of all the art forms, music is the only one where if you hear a song, you can pinpoint who you were with, what you were wearing. There are so many emotions that, I mean, if you go to the Louvre and see the Mona Lisa, what do you see? A picture of the Mona Lisa 10 years later? Oh, I was wearing a blue coat, and it doesn't compute. There's so much more that actually playing or listening. Listening is an important skill as well for everyone.
Yeah.
Well,
you know,
go ahead. Yep, I was listening.
The listening thing.
Poorly, though.
Yes,
well,
thank you.
It's the time delay. Yeah, it's really curious to me about the listening thing, because it's the other thing that we do as musicians. We make noise and we also listen to it, and it's the two things. And it's the area that I think we all as musicians could work on more than we do. Which is the listening bit, because we do a lot of practice, you know, we practice to achieve goals and all of that stuff. And we also work on tone, and we work really hard on what we're actually sending out there. So there's lots of parts of it, but somebody's doing that. It's respectful to listen to that work they've put into their tone, giving them the space to hear the work they've done. But also the listening also allows that conversation to happen. That's one of the areas that I like to work with musicians on a lot, especially in my band as well. When we're producing tracks, key way to produce or arrange a track, especially the way that we work, is to always look at the space you have and work out what is going to interrupt, as in take the attention away from the thing that you want, whether it be a lyric or a little part of the motif that's important, and what's going to clutter up the space in terms of rhythms. So you go simpatico, is it? You go sympathetic to what's going on. Go, okay, you identify the important thing. So you go, okay, it's the lyric. At this point, this lyric is delivering a beautiful kind of cadence of resolution to the melodic flow. It's just happened. At that point, you don't want any rhythmic stuff. So whatever rhythmic idea was happening before that happens has to resolve to open up space for the cadence to happen. And that's the conversation that we have as musicians, is to identify the flow of the conversation and what colours should be there to support it or come out of the way or echo it even. And I'm learning a hell of a lot about that whilst producing this record, because we're being very ambitious with the harmony, very ambitious with the rhythms. I mean, I live in the subdivision world in terms of my feel, my tastes. So I'm always in the 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a you know, and it's all in my music. So to get away with that, you have to be very conscious about the space and the placement of everything. And so, it's really exciting. And we're actually producing over Zoom, Nick and I. at the moment.
Wow,
He works at
interesting.
his place, I work at mine. It's crazy. I love tech for that, for this, right?
Yeah.
It's the best. It's the best of both worlds, really. Talk about learning and experiences. You had quite an experience with Hans Zimmer when he asked you to sing Purple Rain, something you thought you could never do. Tell us that amazing story.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a tricky one because my dad was unwell, long term, had various cancers, but he was always on his feet. But just as I left for the tour, he was starting to go downhill, kind of like, is he going to be all right? So I was getting all of these reports that he wasn't doing so great. And this was a long tour. So I did warn Hans that my dad was not very well. And we set up a situation so that I had a deck ready in case I needed to go home. Prince passed away in, I think it was the May, was it the May? I think something like that. I'm not sure about the dates, but he that impacted me really hard, and I felt really upset in a way that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I had seen him live. I took my kids to see him live when he was at the O2. That was great. I'm so glad they got to see him. I wasn't a massive fan though. I had a couple of records. I don't buy a huge amount of records, popular artists, but I did have Love Sexy and something else and Sign of the Times. I thought it's quite momentous that he's gone, Prince, because he was one of, if not, I would actually have described him as the last genuinely kind of funk artists that was mainstream, that was left. There's no more. He was the last one for me. That was actually crossed over into that kind of territory of actually being a superstar, because all the other artists were kind of low radar and have got their niche fan base, but not so well known, you know. So when he went, I was just like, this is the end of an era. We're never going to hear any funk on the British television again. I was like, no, gutted. So we stayed up having a drink and, you know, toast to Prince's memory and playing tunes in my hotel room. I think we all went to bed about 5 a.m. Really, really like a little bit hungover, to be quite honest. We did have a gig that next day, but we were tour warriors. We were used to all of that. So it's fine. But then as I was packing up to go to sound check, Hans phoned up and said, we're going to do a tribute to Prince later. Will you sing Purple Rain? And I said, I've never sung that before. I've never sung anybody's song before, because I had been singing in my own band, but I've never sung a cover because I'm not a singer. I was just singing my songs. He said he heard my hesitancy, and you know, Hans being Hans, he's what the term I could use. I was going to say something that's quite British, but it's quite rude at the same time. Anyway, he the term is pussyfoot, right? You know what pussyfoot means? Okay, it's pussyfooting around. Okay, it doesn't translate in America so well. He was like, he heard my hesitancy, and he said, well, look, he was to the point. If you don't want to do it, I'll get someone else. And I said, wait. So I realized that if I said no, I might really kick myself later. So I said, okay. And then I was panicking and I was packing my bags and I downloaded the lyrics, because I didn't actually know the lyrics of the song. I scribbled them out on some hotel paper, and then I was trying to learn it while I was packing my bag. We went to sound check, and on the bus, it was quite a ride. On the bus, we were practicing the song, and then sound check, we tried it. I mean, I had like an hour to learn the whole thing, and I was reading it off a bit of paper. You know, it's like when you play bass and you sing, you have to embed this stuff, the rhythm.
You're going in two different directions.
Well, it's either one or the other. You're going to play the bass line right, or you're going to sing right.
Yeah, exactly. I was fortunate because that bass line was very
simple.
Yeah.
Right, all quarter notes.
Yeah. None of that 16th note.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I kind of had my audition in sound check, really, and he heard it and he was like, yeah, it's cool, you can do it. So I did it, but what happened in the actual gig was that by now my late night 5 a.m. had caught up with me. Also the fact that my dad was ill and wasn't looking like he was going to make it through summer. Actually, I kind of knew that he wouldn't make it through summer. It just hit me. And we were on stage, and you know, I was up at the mic, and there was 11,000 people there. I'd never sung in front of an audience that size personally, my own stuff. And we did the first verse, and then we were about to sing the chorus. And until we got to the chorus, I was playing like this and looking down, because my tech had written out the lyrics in Sharpie on white paper, so I could read it, because I didn't know the lyrics very well. And they got to the chorus. And I looked up, and at that point, I saw that everybody had their iPhone lights on and stuff. Got choked. And I was like, Purple Rain. But luckily, there's a couple of other singers there, and they took over. But I was a bit of a mess. But it was amazing. And, you know, I kind of critique that, because I'm not a singer by trade. I've done a bit. But I also had all these excuses that people have, and I didn't sound as good as I would have liked to have sung. But it does feel, even now, you know, I'm really glad that I did that, because it was such a special moment for all of us, actually. Just felt really good. Just felt good. It might not have been the slickest kind of production of all time, but it felt good, you know. And
sure, you did it.
this big show with so much production around it. And then we just played just as a band, for a few minutes. Yeah. It's really lovely. So yeah.
Es gibt eine kleine Programmänderung. Nämlich gestern haben wir einen der größten Künstler der Welt verloren. Und für uns ist das, für euch, für alle ist es ganz schlimm. Und da haben wir heute auf dem Bus gesessen. Und ich muss das jetzt auf Englisch machen. Wir haben nämlich, if I don't do this in English, my band won't understand what we're going to do. So we, on the bus, we came up with hopefully a fitting tribute for a man who gave us so much ingenious music, so much style, so much pleasure, so much everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Yolanda Charles is going to go. Well, the whole band, we're all going to have a go at this. We only worked it out this afternoon, so if it goes a bit wrong, it comes from the heart to Prince.
I never meant to cause you any sorrow. I never meant to cause you any pain. I only wanted to see you laughing. I only want to see you laughing in the purple rain.
Ladies and gentlemen, Yolanda Charles. Für unseren Freund Prince.
You've been preparing your whole life for it, really.
You know what? That is so on the money, because if I hadn't done the talking in front of the crowds at the colleges work to get through my nervousness and that, and got used to singing and playing, which I did because I had the college bookings to do these workshops, I wouldn't have been able to just sing and play that song.
So you did the work. You put in the work.
I did, yeah.
You know, there's a great, you work with the Mod Father, and let's talk a little bit of bass. He had an influence on your bass playing because you're Yolanda with your bass up here, right, David? We all went through that phase. Right?
No, we didn't.
Well, of course
no,
not,
we did
David.
not.
Well, David has.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
No.
Well, some of us did. Excuse me.
I mean, I'm wearing my bass now. It's down to my
yes,
knees.
I know it does. Look,
Yes.
there you go.
All right, we're going to play games? Okay.
All right, David's going to show off.
Right.
That's it. It's a boat to right. The Spandau Ballet. Look at that.
Oh, look at that, baby. Damn.
To our listener, he is showing off his six-string
and
Ken
to your
Bevensey
previous
bass.
comment about that, the A, look
Oh,
at this. That's 2 octaves right there. I'm not giving you the finger.
thanks.
That's a
I guess he
D.
is.
That's a D.
That's a convenient little trick. I love that.
Exactly. However, that
Yeah.
30, the 30 gauge,
Yeah.
thin,
Yeah.
really.
A bit too thin at the top, right? I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Well, you're a 5-string player, so David has 1 more string than you. He has 2 more strings than I do on my 4-string. David is a very staunch advocate of the 6-string bass.
Hello, you. This is fretless, right?
There's no
No.
frets on
This
that.
was just built for me.
Oh, well, it's good.
It's wonderful. Fretless.
No, I'm a 5-string player. I always have my 4-string handy because most of my students are 4-string players.
Okay.
This is one of my babies, my Sandberg. It's the one that's on the album that I'm making right now. And then I've got a Dingwall combustion as well, which is very cool. But yes, you're right. I had the bass up around about here because I think it's a way better slap bass position.
Right, you get all the notes there,
It
David.
makes thumbs up like so easy. And when you drop it, you kind of either have to drop down or you have to kind of alter your technique a little bit. So I found it really to be in Paul, the Modfather's space with my 1980s tastes, because he was definitely more of a 60s guy.
Right, and he told you to drop the bass down. And that affects your playing, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I guess I didn't have to slap it on his gig. Imagine.
I would love to do that.
Anyway, yeah, it was a bit, he was, I mean, all right, okay, check me out, right? I was 22. So I'm this kid. I know what 22 is now because I've got, young people that I've raised, and that's young. And so he's quite intimidating. I think I would respond to an instruction about how to hold my bass and how long it should be differently today, you know.
Yolanda, Billy Sheehan said to me once, and it made more sense than anything, when you're sitting down and practicing, why would you change what that's going to end up being when you stand? You're going to have to reevaluate all of what you learned this way all of a sudden. The other great thing he said is, get yourself a piece of leather, cut it the right thing, and that's all you need. And he was absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually recommend people get a one of those guitar footstools, get the bass in the right place so they can sit with their knees akimbo, put the bass where it should be as if they were standing.
Right.
Make the beginner stand up, see what the bass should be on their body, bass on their torso, this length here, and then work out what the equivalent sitting position is. You're quite right. It's something that you don't realize it until you might be sitting down and then you've got to go and do a gig for the first time or play with people stood up, and it's like, wow, this feels weird.
Yeah,
exactly.
So you're quite right. But yeah, it's a very personal thing how you have your bass set on your body. But this is the thing about session work. Session work involves letting go of a bit of your character and your personality and allowing yourself to be molded into the thing they want you to be. That's as a musician, like stylistically, even looks to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
I had complaints from one female artist I worked for, from her manager, not from her, that the most flattering colours that I wore, because we had 5 or 6 gigs, and we had to do dress rehearsals, and all the things that looked great on me were banned. I wasn't allowed to wear them. It's like, oh, great, thanks. Can you just wear a sackcloth, please? Can you make a bin bag on your head?
That's it.
They get a chance to ask you to be whatever they want you to be. That's why one of the things I do say to people is, are you sure you want to be a session musician? Have you got the character for it? Because actually, you have to be a team player in respect of there's a boss, there's a hierarchical situation. It's not level playing field. You're not an equal, you're a hiree, but you also have to kind of do things that people ask of friends, but you're also being paid a salary, and it's really confusing, and you can get it wrong and get fired because you overstepped. So are you sure you've got the character to understand the politics of this stuff? And also, are you an argumentative type of person? Are you going to push back when somebody who's maybe not got the best personal skills in the world might be making a demand of you in an unfriendly tone of voice or using language you don't like? You might have signed a contract, and your contract has not got a get out clause that if they don't speak to me nicely, I can leave. Oh, no. No, there's none of that. So when you sign that contract, you're obligated. So you sure know that you want that gig, because be careful what you ask for. Some of those tyrannical MDs can give you nightmares for years after, So it's one of those situations that people are unaware, the challenge that's involved, and not only of changing your playing, dropping your bass down because it looks too, what do you think you are, Mark King, is what Paul said to me. I was like, I wish. And if I was, I wouldn't be here, mate. All right.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I brought my 6-string bass to a jingle date, they were really uptight. It's the same 4 strings in the middle. I promise you I won't touch the other 2. The looks were deceiving. Oh, Tom, remember when I talked about that Billy Idol audition?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's like 1981, and I was playing in a new wave band, a skinny tie band, and I had all these new romantic kind of clothes.
That you still have in the closet, by the way.
Billy Idol audition. And everyone there was in black leather. I don't care if I stripped naked and played the bass backwards. I was not getting that gig.
Which you did eventually, but that's another story.
But that's a whole other story.
Let me ask you one more thing, Yolanda. You can see David and I are fashionistas. Tell me about acid funk fashion.
Yes. I should have worn one today. That's silly of me. I should have got my hoodie. Yeah, I'm basically trying to create a creative space for other artists. I want to sell my band merchandise, of course, and I'm also going to use it as a kind of shop to sell my CDs, albums, LPs, anything else that we put together that's useful for people, that's to do with the band. Okay. But that aside, I've got 2 artists lined up so far to give me original designs to put out their work for sale, and I'm working on a nice kind of split for them that's actually more, for me, from my point of view, fairer on them as the actual creators of these pieces. But also I will offer them on T-shirts, and so if people aren't actually a fan of my band, they can buy something else. They don't have to buy stuff with pH all over the body, So that's the plan.
I'll have to order some swag. Well, thank you for being on the show. Oh, Yolanda, please, for us, can you do a PSA?
Hi, my name is Yolanda Charles, and you're listening to Notes from an Artist.
All right. Wonderful.
Did I say it right?
Excellent. Well, thanks for being on the show, David. It was exciting to have British royalty in our presence. MBA? You said MBE, I'm sorry. Your Majesty, Your Excellency.
MBA,
you would like the MBA. Let me ask you, MBE, do you get any perks? Do you get, you get a medal? I saw pictures of the Beatles with their MBE.
Yes, there's a medal, and there's a nice letter from a recently departed Queen that's actually signed by her with acting. Wow. And I would have been invited to the palace, one of the palaces, maybe St. James's or something, but I just didn't go.
Oh.
I didn't want to go. Didn't wear a hat. It was not my thing. The pomp, I don't have pomp and ceremony, but that's got a kind of perk, right?
And that's it. No discount at Marks and Spencer or anything like that.
There should be. I should write a letter of complaint and put the complaints from Yolanda Charles MBE, and maybe that would make them straighten up their collar and gym.
Yeah, it should be. Why not?
Yeah, right.
You should have a sword. What about a sword to fight dragons in England? I mean, there's got to have some.
Somebody's got to fight the dragons. I mean, what are we going to do with that?
Who's going to slay the dragons in the UK? Well, when you write your autobiography, we have to talk again, okay? Deal?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. All right. Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be cool.
And hopefully David and I will get to the UK this year. We love to go every year. We'll sleep on your couch if that's okay.
Come and see us at Ronnie Scott's. Hopefully we'll still have some dates there. And you can sleep in the garden shed.
Just like we do now, David, with ours. Be well. Thanks for talking. David, let's talk about the Yolanda Charles playlist we both have curated. The one track that we couldn't play, which we talked about in the show, was the Hans Zimmer tribute to Prince, Purple Rain, but you guys can look that up on YouTube, just YouTube Hans Zimmer and Yolanda Charles, and that'll pop right up for you. But what an amazing set list we have tonight, David.
And how diverse, from Paul Weller to Robbie Williams, Squeeze, Aztec Camera, Marcella Detroit, Mick Jagger. Remember him?
Michael Jagger, Sir Philip Michael Jagger, yes.
Yeah, Misty Olden, B.B. King. I mean, think about that. B.B. King.
And we also
Take that, you two.
And we also have some of her projects that she's worked on, the Deep Bow, Mama Yo, and I think we have a couple of PH tracks in there as well. So great interview with Yolanda. We hope to have her back again. Yolanda Charles MBE. And let's get to the Yolanda playlist. There it is.
See you next week, folks.
Thanks for listening.